Hello and welcome to this training on supporting communication for deaf, hearing impaired children and young people. I'm Alex Oram, teacher of the deaf and multisensory impaired for Peterborough City Council. And later in the presentation you will hear Kat Tatano, speech and language therapist for Peterborough NHS. If you have any questions, then please don't hesitate to contact the sensory team on Peterborough 454460. This module is part of a suite of modules prepared by the Peterborough Sensory team, and so you may like to look at the other modules for further information on hearing impairment. There are activities to complete as you go along and some videos. For the videos, you will need access to the internet and may need to copy and paste the links into your browser. There are several outcomes that you will be aware of by the end of this module. Different ways a deaf child may communicate, how deafness may affect communication development, strategies to support communication for a deaf child or young person, and specialist support available. At the end of the module, there are slides which contain links to useful resources. We're going to think about conversations now. Can you think what makes a person good to talk to? Take a couple of minutes to note down your ideas. Your ideas may have included because they're a good listener, because you know the person, because they make me feel listened to, because it makes you feel confident when you talk to them, or because they make you laugh. It's important to make communication enjoyable. It's not just about how clearly you may speak to the person or sign to the person. It's important that the message gets across, and also that you enjoy the interaction. For example, a memorable conversation may consist of you adding humour or telling stories about what you did last time you saw each other. So there are many reasons for communication. For example, asking for something, getting information, making a complaint, answering, making sure, persuading, influencing others, and sharing information. Focusing on what the child wants to say is important, as well as responding to the message. So try not to get overly caught up with the specific communication method that the deaf child's using. It's important to give the child a chance to talk, so allow pauses and sufficient time for them to talk, and don't dominate the conversation by being tempted to fill in the gaps. How do deaf children communicate? All deaf children are different, and their preferred communication method will depend on, for example, their level of deafness, the type of technology they use, their family background, or age at diagnosis. It's important to find out how best to communicate with the child by observing and interacting with them, as well as talking to people who already know the child well, such as their family or other key people in their life. You may think that all deaf children sign, but actually only 20% do. Most deaf children communicate by listening and speaking, the auditory oral approach. They may communicate through sign language, be sign bilingual, or by using a combination of methods flexibly. This is known as total communication. So they may use sign, speech, residual hearing, finger spelling, gesture, facial expression, lip reading. Deaf children use and make use of other people's gestures 3 times as much as hearing children do. A child may be able to speak another home language better than English, so it's important to find out from their family how they communicate at home, and to ensure that when that child is assessed, their home language is also factored into this assessment. It's important not to assume that because the child is deaf that they can't achieve. It's your job as a teaching assistant or teacher to work out how best to communicate with them and to ensure they have the correct strategies in place, such as the appropriate listening environment. The impact of a child's hearing loss on their speech and language will depend on various factors, including the age of diagnosis. Diagnosis may have been at birth, since the introduction of universal newborn hearing screening, or it may not have been picked up at birth, in which case the child's language may be more affected if they haven't received the early intervention. This might be the case if they have progressive hearing loss or a condition that might go unnoticed, such as glue ear. For hearing-impaired children with severe to profound losses in particular, it can be difficult to ensure that they receive enough language exposure to enable them to have competent language skills. In order to gain adult-like competence, children need to be exposed to the language before the age of 6 to 7 years. This can have implications for deaf children who have had inconsistent amplification. For example, they haven't worn their hearing aids consistently, or they've had late implantation of a cochlear implant. They may not have been exposed to a fluent language early on, or they've had fluctuating hearing conditions. The age of receiving the technology can affect their speech and language. Technology may not have been introduced immediately through parental choice, or if the hearing impairment wasn't diagnosed early in life. The technology may not be worn consistently. For example, the child refuses to wear it. The child's use of English may be delayed if there's more than one language being used at home, for example, British Sign Language or BSL, or the parent's native language is being used at home. So it's important to know how fluent they are in that language that's being used at home. Their language may be impacted if the parents speak to them in a language in which they themselves aren't fluent, and so the child isn't hearing a fluent language. The child or young person's access to speech will be affected by the level of the child's hearing loss and the nature of that loss. For example, if the child has a fluctuating hearing loss, such as glue ear, this may mean that their access to speech differs on different days and according to the environmental conditions. The level of their loss may mean that they aren't able to access high-frequency speech sounds, such as a s, without consistent hearing aid or cochlear implant use, which will affect their ability to hear word endings correctly in noisy conditions, and will mean they need extra support, such as a radio aid or a sound field system. Technology is covered further in another of the HI training modules. Hearing and listening are two different things. With the use of the child's technology and correct amplification, for example, hearing aids, cochlear implants, sound field systems, radio aids, the child may be able to hear, but are they able to listen? For example, you can hear the radio on a car journey, but you may not be able to tell someone the name of the songs at the end of the journey. Listening is hearing plus attention. Your speech and language therapist or teacher of the deaf can help with ideas to actively encourage the child to listen. They may need separate interventions from you as a teaching assistant on helping them to listen. Deaf children may need extra support. Lip reading is the ability to understand speech by carefully watching the lip patterns and movement of the tongue and face of the person speaking. Deaf children naturally try to lip read when they're communicating, especially when there is a high level of background noise. It is estimated that only 30 to 40% of speech sounds can be lip read, even under the best conditions, and extra information is usually required to understand what is being said. It's incredibly tiring trying to lip read. It's used alongside other communication methods, such as facial expressions, natural gestures, knowing the topic of conversation. It isn't easy, as many speech sounds look the same on the lips. For example, pat and bat, or ball and paw. A child who is just developing language will find it harder to lip read words they are not familiar with. Watch the video now, what is it like to lip read, and then try the lip reading challenge. There are different types of sign language, so if someone tells you that the child signs or requires sign support, you need to know which form of sign language you should use and when. Your child's teacher of the deaf or speech and language therapist will be able to let you know what level of sign language the child can understand and use. British Sign Language is a visual language using handshakes, facial expressions, gestures and body language. It is a complete language with a unique vocabulary and structure that is different from written and spoken English. It's evolved over time with regional dialects. Practice some BSL signs by watching the video and signing along. If you want to practice BSL further, refer to the resources at the end of this PowerPoint. There's some more ways to practice. Fingerspelling is a method of spelling words using hand movements. The fingerspelling alphabet is used in sign language to spell out names of people and places for which there is not a sign. Fingerspelling can also be used to spell words for signs that the signer does not know the sign for, or to clarify a sign that is not known by the person reading the signer. Try fingerspelling now. Click on the link and you will find the fingerspelling alphabet card. Another method of sign language is Sign-Supported English, or SSE. SSE uses signs taken from BSL. It uses English word order, but you don't sign every word. It is mainly used to support spoken English and is often used in education. To see the difference between SSE and BSL, watch the video now. Another method of communication is signed English. Every word of the spoken sentence is signed, and it uses English language grammar in spoken word order. It's sometimes used in schools for literacy skills. Makaton is another form of sign language which uses symbols, signs and speech in spoken word order to enable people to communicate. It's often used in special schools. Tactile sign language is used with deaf-blind people. It can be called hands-on sign language or hand-under-hand communication, where the signer places their hand underneath the receiver and the receiver feels the shape of the signs. Signs are based on BSL and include the deaf-blind alphabet.
We're now going to think about some of the challenges faced by deaf children and young people, as well as their families. Having a deaf child in the family can interfere with those early interactions between caregiver and child. Hearing parents of deaf children may use less complex language in order to simplify it for their deaf child, which in turn can add to the child's language delay and may impact on their ability to use abstract language skills in conversation. The language model offered to deaf children by their parents may not be accessible to the child. For example, the child may be deaf born to hearing parents and the child's first language is BSL, which can impact upon the child's language development if the parents aren't fluent in BSL. Sometimes the parents prefer the child's first language at home to be English, but as this isn't the language they're fluent in, it can lead to delayed language for the child and frustrations when they can't make themselves understood. Deaf children can find language skills more difficult to acquire than their hearing peers, as they have fewer opportunities for natural interaction. They are unable to listen in to another person's conversations and often need language repeated in order to understand it. Abstract words such as happiness or trust and function words such as to or it are more difficult to acquire, as they aren't as easy to represent in a concrete way, such as in a picture. Homophones, words with more than one meaning that sound the same, are also difficult. For example, you hear with your ears, or hear the place, and a river bank versus a bank where money is stored. Some children have a high-frequency hearing loss, which may mean they're unable to hear the high-frequency S sound at the end of words, ED endings, possessive S, particularly if they're not sufficiently aided, don't wear their aids consistently, or there is background noise. High-frequency speech sounds generally give the meaning to speech. Deaf children may also struggle with theory of mind, putting yourself in another person's position, and may have difficulty in identifying what a character might be thinking or taking into account someone else's point of view. Deaf children may struggle with higher level language skills such as idioms, for example, pull your socks up, sometimes taking the phrase literally, as well as sarcasm and inference. Deaf children are often older when mastering these complex language skills. Deaf children are very likely to have gaps in their vocabulary due to not picking up language incidentally from listening to conversations going on around them. They will need more repetition, as they need to hear a word more times than their hearing peers before they remember and are able to use it. Pragmatics involve abstract and complex language skills. Without these skills, deaf children will find conversational communication and literacy more difficult. Deaf children and young people often need extra support with social communication and with how to adapt their language to different situations and the needs of the listener. Deaf children may find it difficult to follow the rules of conversations and how to retell stories or events that have happened to them. Their limited vocabulary also impacts on their pragmatic ability. The language of exams can be difficult for deaf children, such as describing and discriminating, which can cause difficulties with higher level problems and can also cause them to fall behind in maths, where there are a number of problems to be solved that involve language. Grammar causes challenges for deaf children, particularly those that are deaf and have English as an additional language or are BSL users, as the grammar may have different rules to English. Children that use BSL as their native language may struggle with English grammar, as there isn't always a direct correspondence between a word and a sign. Signs can have multiple meanings depending on their context. The word order is different to spoken English. BSL uses facial expressions to describe negatives and questions, and it doesn't use tenses for time. Plurals in BSL are expressed by quantity rather than altering the noun, and BSL doesn't use little words such as the or a. Following strategies may support communication. Get the child's attention, wave or knock the table, tap their shoulder lightly. Ensure they can see your face clearly. Don't move around while you're talking, as it will make it more difficult for the child to read your lips and hear your voice. Watch the video Face Me When You Talk and consider the impact for the child in a group situation and on their sense of belonging and social development. Speak clearly and naturally. Don't slow your voice down, as this can distort the sound and it will make it harder for the child to listen. Make your lip patterns visible. Eating, chewing gum and having facial hair such as a moustache can make it more difficult to read lips. Listen to the sentence. What does she say? Watashi wa inu ga suki desu. Now have a look at these symbols. Any ideas what the message in the recording is now? That's right, I love dogs. So, the main message is to use visual cues wherever possible. Point to what you're talking about, use gestures to support communication, use photographs and symbols. Other strategies that help to support the deaf child are glossaries, individual to that child or young person, with a picture next to each word, and maybe mind maps. Some other strategies include making it clear what the topic of conversation is and make sure the child knows when the topic has changed. Try to stand with light on your face, for example by a window. Poor lighting makes lip reading difficult. In a group situation, speak one at a time, for example by putting your hand up to take a turn. Try to reduce background noise. You can see the supporting teaching and learning module for more information about this. Allow time to communicate and wait for the child to respond. You may be waiting for some time, but don't be tempted to fill in the gaps. Ensure the deaf child has understood by repeating an answer from a peer, repeating the question or information. They will need the information more times than their hearing peers. Subtly check for understanding by asking a question about the work set that involves an answer rather than a yes or no. For example, try asking, "What are you going to do now?" rather than, "Do you know what you need to do?" The deaf child might need time before the session to pre-learn a concept and time at the end to revise the concept away from the whole class situation. Help the child to structure conversations with their peer group to ensure they feel included. Change your interactive style. For example, try not to simply instruct the child. Instead, let the child speak and you comment rather than ask questions, or repeat their comments back to them. Emotions vocabulary. Try to talk about what people are thinking or feeling and why, rather than just what other people doing and where questions. Use word-aware strategies to support vocabulary development. The speech and language therapy team can give training on this, and there is a reference to the Word Aware book at the end of the presentation. Never give up when communicating with the child. Use any strategy you both can to keep communication going, for example, writing the message down or doing a drawing, etc. Some children will need extra help to develop their speech and language. Specialist support is available from the teacher of the deaf and speech and language therapist, who can visit the child in school, give support to school staff, and work on specific targets with the child if required. It's important for the child to practice between their visits and that carryover happens in the classroom. On the next few slides, you'll find a list of useful resources. We hope you've enjoyed this training. Thank you.